One of the unique things about Ireland is that you have to take a view to where we are and where we're hoping to go. And like everything in Ireland, we do have a housing crisis. We don't have enough units being built. And we are also in flux when it comes to the rental market. Even in the last 2 weeks, there's been changes or proposed changes in rental laws that are they're proposed to help, but they're actually going to cause a lot of landlords to exit the market.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Andrew Rhatigan, the Managing Director at Rhatigan Real Estate. He helps real estate investors with not just the practical strategy of finding and investing into great deals, but also the mindset required. So mindset is a common topic on this podcast. So I'm very excited. Thank you for being on the show, Andrew. I'm really appreciate you being here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Delighted to be here and looking forward to it. Absolutely.
Let's start. As I mentioned, I like to let the guests tell their story. I feel like it'll sound better. Plus, you've got a better accent than me, so it'll work out great. We'll let you do lots of talking here. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your background, kind of what got you to where you are today.
So I think a big part of why I do what I do is mindset, but I think I suppose the lessons in that are a lifetime of doing things rightly and wrongly and learning, and then they bring you to this point. So I have a family that are based in property development over a number of years. And I suppose it's something that I ran away from at an early age. It's a classic family thing. You either fold into it or you run away from it. And my father passed when I was younger. So I typically decided I wanted to go and do my own thing. And I think all throughout my life, there was a common theme of working hard, having an entrepreneurial spirit, wanting to do things. So if I wanted a car, I would cut grass, earn money and buy the car. And then I suppose that was the blooming idea, or the blossoming idea, the concept of working to make money. And I began to grow from working to building out different ideas. And then when I was in college, I studied psychology, and I did it originally because I thought it would sound good at a dinner party, which is, I was 18, I was meeting a guidance counselor who was dying for a cigarette. And, pick one on the list that looks good. And I thought, what would sound good when I'm holding a martini? Psychology. That's it. Absolutely. And don't ask me what it was at the time. Much like veterinary, I didn't know one end of it from the other by the time when I was making the decision. But all throughout my life, I found a common thread was I was dealing in sales of some sort, whether it be a product or a service, but more importantly, people. And I suppose throughout my working life, I essentially reverse engineered what I enjoyed doing. And that led me during COVID to start my own property agency in Ireland. So we're a qualified real estate agent, but we didn't want to be a generalist. So I wanted to advocate for buyers, and I wanted to guide people who are busy, who are probably fed up of people selling them something and taking a percentage of their earnings rather than being that consultative, that advisory guidance piece in their life. And then I just folded in the psychology, mindset, and authenticity into it. So we source property for people, but that's probably 10% of the role. 90% of it is people, relationships, humor, and authenticity. And that's where we are right now.
So the background is the more it's very interesting to me, because I feel like the more I do this podcast and the more people from different backgrounds and things like that, it like so much about just real estate, but like life in general is psychology. Sales is the word that gets thrown around there, but it really comes down to sort of helping people with their mindset around whatever the end product or end goal is. And so I think it's a very fascinating topic to me personally, but I think that's like understanding those concepts are a huge part of just being successful in general. When you started this real estate agency, did you niche down kind of what's the focus? Is it residential real estate? What type of real estate are you typically helping people with?
It tends to be residential, and it's a mixture between investors and those who want to build up a family portfolio for either themselves or for legacy. But we tend to work with C-suite executives, expats, business owners. And
Okay.
I suppose a big part of what makes us different is I come from a place of kindness, but I don't get taken in by what people have. And I suppose how I've created this business or way of doing things was really looking at the people. And this is where the psychology end of it comes in. And it's what I love about it is that I could meet Bono. I haven't. I know I'm Irish, but people may assume I live down the road from him. I haven't met him, but I can appreciate what Bono does in a professional capacity. But by virtue of what I do for a living, Bono is still flawed. He's a human being. And the role I play is understanding how I can either help guide them on that journey or fold in the property piece to it. And I suppose that's the piece that I find fascinating because it's all of the things I overlooked as I grew up and made mistakes. You know, I wasn't naturally a lawyer. I wasn't naturally a doctor. I didn't have an area that I was drawn to originally. But this broad stroke of things I've done in my life have brought me into this, and I kind of bring it. It's almost like a patchwork quilt of all the lessons I've learned, and then I folded it into real estate. And real estate is the title, but under that, there's so much more to it. It's the connection piece, the relationship piece, networking piece, and also guidance. Sometimes people pay me to tell them no, as opposed to just do what they want me to do.
Yeah. I don't know anything about the real estate market in Ireland. I wondered if you could, and I would hazard to guess probably a lot of our listeners don't. You're working with investors, so maybe something that I immediately think, oh, do I want to look at investment property in Ireland? I mean, how tell me a little bit about how the market is structured. If you're looking, people are investing there. What kind of properties are we looking at? How would that be if I were to be a client? How would that look for me? Because you said you've worked with people from the U.S.
Yeah. So
Well.
first and foremost, a big part of the discovery process is what people's version of winning is, because you could have someone that has a certain amount of money and they want to put it to work, and they're pretty agnostic in terms of where they want it to go. They don't really necessarily care. They just want someone to either park it or put it to good use. I suppose part of looking at the Irish market is understanding the nuances of it. So if you're looking at this podcast from abroad, we don't have 7 or 14-day closes with no contingency plans. We don't have mortgages that are drawn down in a very short space of time. It's a very, very long and drawn out process most of the time. So I suppose the nuance for a lot of people looking from the outside in is, I have money, I want this property, I'll just buy it. And when you're in Ireland and you're here on the ground, you realize that that is completely different, because it is very relationship based. It is very nuanced as to the dynamics of someone who is actually selling a property. And when you're guiding an investor, a lot of it is about understanding what their risk tolerance is. So if you said to me you wanted to invest in Ireland, I'd first and foremost get a feel for what you've done before. So what your appetite is for investing in various settings, what your profile is to waiting it out. And I will always work through a hypothetical. So if I was to buy something with you tomorrow, Jason, I would say, this is a great location. It's giving you a very good yield, but I want you to work through this mental exercise of, it all goes wrong. What's that going to mean for Jason day to day? What's your appetite for sticking with something and watching it? What's your appetite for waiting or equally doubling down on an investment? So when we're trying to figure out what it is people want, a lot of it is pushing at the questions that people may not be expected to ask, because they just assume someone's going to give me €1 million or €2 million and I just buy them something. Yes, that can happen, but sometimes someone may tell you what they think they want, and then you guide them to the reality on the ground. It's much like if I say to you, I'm thinking of going to Florida and I have to go to Disneyland and I'm going to stay in a hotel right beside Disneyland. You say, whoa, you're going to like Disney for 2 days. It's going to cost you 10 grand. And if you want my opinion, I'd move 10 kilometers that way so you actually enjoy your holiday away. In investing in Ireland, a lot of that is understanding how to guide people. So we understand what their risk tolerance is, what their budget is, what their goals are, and then also what their understanding of the market is. And then a lot of it is trying to guide them through what that means and sticking with them until we find what works well.
Yeah, that's a huge part of I guess, understanding the market, right? That's a huge part of investing. And I think especially if you're looking to invest someplace that you're not sort of intimately familiar with that market, that's where you really need someone like yourself to guide through that process. You mentioned it's not as simple as, kind of some of the, I guess I'm wondering about, is the mortgage process is different there, that kind of whole, logistically, is it a different process than in Ireland than it might be in the US? I guess probably it is. I would assume so.
Are you planning a remodel or construction project? Overwhelmed by the process? Over budget? Extended timelines? Strained relationships? We are all too familiar. At Lark Construction Services, we help homeowners and business owners take control of their construction journey, from reviewing bids and contracts to catching red flags before they become costly mistakes. Our Clarity Audit is a one-on-one expert review of your plans, estimates, or current progress, giving you the peace of mind and a defined action plan to move forward with confidence. Don't let confusion lead to costly errors. Visit larkconstruction.com and schedule your free call today. Lark Construction Services, saving you time, money, and stress.
Yeah, so there's only a finite number of lenders in Ireland, and I suppose we're not a huge country, so it's not going to draw a huge crowd from a international perspective. So when companies are coming in to lend, they're usually slow to be able to get into the market, and when they do, they're dealing with legacy lenders. When you're applying from outside Ireland, we are not, I suppose the best way to describe the States from an Irish or outside perspective is you're very entrepreneurially driven. So you're very, how can we make this work? Let's put a deal together. Let's figure it out. And there may be clever ways to put together something financially, like using different financial tools or instruments or partners, seller financing, for example, like different examples of things that may work when it comes to investing or buying businesses. In Ireland, you have to, I suppose, when you're looking at the landscape internationally, you've got to say, well, right, if there's a currency fluctuation and you're bringing currency in, there is going to be anti-money laundering challenges that you have to overcome to make sure the money is legitimate. When it comes to lending and you're coming from abroad, you have to have a certain amount of money to be able to leverage off and then understand what the lenders expect and what role someone on the ground will play on your behalf. And then when you're, I suppose, assessing what a deal looks like, you then have to take into account, it may be a case that you have a seller that has a price that they want, you give them the price and they do a deal. But more often than not, there's either a background piece to that a buyer has to understand. So there may be a delay in the sale. There may be an unusual title issue. And unlike the States, we don't have a separate title. We don't have like title companies that come in and are very specialized assassins in that particular setting. So Irish property law is it can be convoluted at times. It can be very outdated. And when you're doing a deal, it's about understanding, okay, well, let's say if you're buying a building, you are buying this building, it's for X. The leasehold on it is only, let's say, 35 to 40 years. So there's a title issue there that we have to arrange to buy out, which is very nuanced. But then also there may be a right of way challenge. And in Ireland, we're still coming up to being digitized and we're not there yet. So we're still a little bit of, the calligraphy, quill and pen equivalent of title in some ways. So when someone comes internationally, you don't have a binding contract, within 7 days. You have contracts that could take 3-4 weeks to be issued and up to 12 weeks to be signed, depending on the circumstances involved. So when you have someone that's working with currency, they don't want to draw down too soon for fear of losing out on currency exchange, or if they're trying to put the money to work in other ways, they may think they can maybe polish off a deal faster than they can. And it's just about understanding that, and also boxing clever with lenders, especially if you're investing, lenders who take that entrepreneurial approach to lending, as opposed to the old world way of, taking their pound of flesh and taking a long time to process it.
If someone was investing there, would they be looking at, I'm buying this as a second home? Is there a rental market? Is there a short-term rental market? Like what, as an investor, what would I know maybe there's multiple options, I don't know, but what would you be what would I be looking for? Or I'm sure, again, it's going to depend on that investor, but what are my opportunities there?
So I think one of the unique things about Ireland is that you have to take a view to where we are and where we're hoping to go. And like everything in Ireland, we do have a housing crisis. We don't have enough units being built. And we are also in flux when it comes to the rental market. Even in the last 2 weeks, there's been changes or proposed changes in rental laws that are they're proposed to help, but they're actually going to cause a lot of landlords to exit the market because they feel that they're not getting the return they need. So, for example, just as a quick broad stroke, there are some properties that you will not be able to increase. You'll only be able to increase it by a certain amount, 2% each year. And if you were to sell, you're only allowed to sell with the tenant in place. These are the proposed plans that are coming in. Mm-hmm. But you will also have legacy people that, let's say, bought property 10 or 15 years ago that aren't getting the return. And by virtue of the laws, they won't be able to get the return because they can't essentially change the rent to make it a profitable enterprise for people. So if you're coming in from outside, I always take a look at infrastructure and where the potential is. So obviously people will know Dublin if they're familiar with Ireland in any shape or form. They look at that as kind of the main city or the main hub. And there are opportunities around certain properties like residential developments for people to invest in the long term. It's not going to give you a huge yield. The yield would be anywhere from 3 to 5% in and around that. It's more of a longer term, park your money in a good location that has upside play. So you're not going to be ringing mom and telling you've won the lotto, but you're parking your money in something that has, good foreign investment. You're buying into the fact that the population growth is there. And we're quite nuanced as a city because we're not London or New York. We are metropolitan, but we're not colossal yet. And I think buying into what that could become is an interesting one. But where I'm more interested in is areas on the periphery around Ireland that have not gotten there yet. And investment is now being put into them infrastructure wise. So you could maybe make €250,000 go further outside of Dublin in a location that you have to maybe do a small amount of work to. It'll have a nominal rent, but the upside on it may be such that you may be able to refinance and go again, if that was what people are inclined to do. So when I understand what people want, some people want to scratch an itch. Some people say, I have people that have lived abroad. They're based abroad. They could be based in America. And obviously it's a hot topic at the moment that they want to base somewhere just in case something happens, or just to know that they can use Dublin or Ireland as a jumping off point for the rest of Europe. And people I would deal with may be financially independent and they could buy somewhere to know they've got a base, and then they come over to Ireland. They can maybe do a bit of business, or they could be retired, and then they use Ireland to go and explore the rest of Europe because it's obviously a good central hub. And then you have other people that want to, I suppose, buy a piece of Ireland in ways that they maybe see there's potential with businesses, transitions with international companies coming over, and they maybe want to try and beat them to it. So when they do make it over to Ireland, they're kind of the first mover here. So it's kind of a broad stroke, but I suppose from a simple example, let's say like when you talk about the multifamily stuff, in Ireland, you don't get as much of that. It tends to be a lot of institutional investors that will have, purpose-built rentals, and that side of the market is quite in flux at the moment. So there's opportunity to be had, but I think there's also a lot of people who are probably quite fearful of what that's going to look like going forward. So unless they're willing to try it or really understand it, they might put their money into gold instead because they don't have to worry about it having a pulse.
Yeah. What about development? You mentioned housing shortage, which I mean, virtually everywhere at this point, but do you feel that there's an opportunity in development in Ireland where people could build, whether it's multifamily or single family?
I think the real challenge in Ireland, Jason, is actually you've got a mixture. So we have historic challenges with property in Ireland, but it's usually the life cycle. So for example, my late father, if he was building 30 years ago, he would have built something that he wanted to build. So let's say if he came across a nice location or a couple of properties with a large plot of land, he builds a relationship with them and then he shows them what he'd like to build. And he would normally build a development that would, you drive by in 20 years time with the grandchildren or children and say, we built this, there's 90, 200 homes here. And, it's a very kind of an organic setting. Now it's become so international that you could be buying land for 30% more than you should. And then the planning laws are so challenging that by the time you get it, it's not a profitable enterprise. So at the moment in Ireland, apartments, you have people that have sites, they have planning approval for apartments, and they're not building them because they're just simply not viable. And I suppose the secondary piece to that is how people live internationally is very different to how we live in Ireland. And I think the Irish have a lot to learn from even in Europe, people on the continent, people in the States. I've had family that have lived in New York, and you have a apartment block, you live in that, and people could live in those their entire lives and rent. In Ireland, we're only just coming around to the private rental market, where you have, purpose-built developments with paddle courts, gyms, party rooms, areas that are purpose-built to create that enhanced lifestyle. But it's all so new to Ireland that we still have that catch on. It's like an early adopter. It's taking us time to figure that out, because in Ireland, we would have typically had the idea that you have to own your front door, you have to have parking, you have to have a garden, and you need 28 bedrooms just in case someone comes to stay. So that's the kind of mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's still, I think, a bit of that in the States too. I think it just kind of depends. I mean, the historical, I live in Los Angeles now. I'm originally from Boston, and the type of housing is very different. You don't see a lot of old, truly old homes here around Los Angeles, but in Boston, that was the norm. That's what I always, that even now, it's if you were going to buy something in and around Boston, you're very likely to be buying 100-year-old triple decker, and you might need to fix it up. And then I would imagine that Ireland is even more, a more extreme version of that. A lot of the real estate is probably, it's centuries old. And I think that always has an impact on what comes later. I think the idea of we're going to have these amazing historical homes, and right next to it, we're going to put some brand new apartment building. It just doesn't, people don't like that. I don't like it. Having grown up around what I did, I understand that sort of value to the historical real estate. And so it's a hard thing to make that shift in, what's going to change the literal landscape of our country by putting in, some of these new developments, but at the same time, then there's not housing for people and stuff. So it is definitely a challenging kind of process for people to work through. I think both at the citizen level and the legislative level, both sides of it are we don't really know what to do with this, and I think it's a hard piece. Do you see that do you see that as just pushback? You said it's sort of people live differently. You think that's more pushback from the citizens themselves in terms of we don't want to see this new development come in?
I suppose it's a mixture, because to understand planning laws, it's almost to imagine progress is progress. So let's say, for example, if you imagine a vacant site, so let's say we'll just use New York as an example, and let's say there's a vacant lot, it will only be vacant for so long before someone uses some form of clever idea to absolutely max out the site in a way that someone else in a normal, inverted commas, part of the world couldn't fathom. So your air rights, for example, above. Do you remember the famous one in the restaurant where they bought the air rights above it? And this restaurant is then baked into this giant multi-story development. I suppose you've got people in Ireland who do want to build. There are home builders that they absolutely thrive on building homes for people. They want to be part of the fabric of development. And I think when you look at how it's created, I suppose it's very at odds with people's understanding of what property means. So I give you an example. I used to be in the car business, and there was this assumption that if I was selling a Porsche or I was selling a nice car, that I found it in a field, I dug it up, I polished it, and I just added 4 zeros and hoped for you to come along so I can make 20x my investment. People didn't understand that you had financing loans, you had time, wage, you have overheads, you've got warranties, costs, and unknowns, let's say. Property is the exact same as cars in a lot of ways, except it's just times 100 or 1,000 when it comes to costs, lack of trust, and then also understanding as to what the process is. So you've got people that want a house today. So let's say I've got 2 kids, they're 9 and 4, but let's say if they were 29 and 24 and I wanted them to live in a locale near me, price point has gone up so high that unless they were in a very unique job or a very unique position, they're either going to need my help or they're going to have to move further afield. And there are hundreds of thousands of people in that situation now. But then equally, you could have someone else that lives next door to a perfect plot of land that someone does want to develop and turn into something, let's say, a little bit edgy. It's not going to be your 50s, 60s style house with low density. Maybe it's going to be something a little bit unique and outside of the ordinary. But when people object to planning, it's not that you're entitled, like everyone's entitled to object and they're entitled to their opinion, but it's not that I accept your objection on this call, we log it, and then it comes to a head within a short time frame. If I'm building something and you're within your realms to object, I could be in court 2 years later trying to make this a viable enterprise, and I'm still paying interest on the loan. I'm still have good people on my team that I want to keep busy in the interim, and price of materials and price of building has gone up, and what's the market like at this particular level. So you have a mixture of government infrastructure, government that want to do something, but equally, I always view it like a parent. We'll make decisions as parents. I see you've got lovely pictures with best dad and daddy. You've clearly won a few in-house awards from your loved ones, which is great. You're doing your job correctly, which is a good thing.
I'm definitely the best dad in this house.
Absolutely. I completely agree. My firstborn is my favorite firstborn ever. Yeah. It's always about the technicality. So yeah. I think when you look at what you do as a parent, we sometimes will make unpopular decisions for the benefit of that child in the long run. And I think if we pander to them sometimes in the short term, it may not be to their interest. And I think the difficulty in a lot of countries when it comes to any government is, if I make a decision now that I know is going to need 15 years to play out, but I'm up for election in 4 years, how much can I push it where I will get what I want, what will enhance the country, and then I also get a chance to change it in time to come. So it's kind of that mixture between people who want to make change. You do have societal structures in place that don't help, but then you also have these legacy pieces of, someone can come in entrepreneurially and like Virgin Airways or whatever, and, like disrupt certain enterprises. But property is one of those that's still slow moving, that unless you're a giant institutional investor that can, allow something to play out in court over 18 months and have, investors' money working away in the background, most people can't necessarily do that. So they kind of have to default to what they can make work. But it's just, you have builders that are just, they want to build and they can't. And I think that's probably the simple way to look at it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and that's not just as you're talking about that stuff, I started thinking it's not just differences between countries. I mean, we have huge differences in zoning laws and in just in the U.S. across states. Sometimes within the same state, there are big differences. But like, for example, when we lived in Houston, Texas for a few years, there's no zoning. You just build. You can build what you want, where you want. It works fine. Houston's like the 4th biggest city in the country. Like it's not a problem. In fact, they've invested a lot into the infrastructure around permitting and building. And I've never seen anywhere else I've lived that has this streamlined of a permitting and building process that they have. But it's because they tried to, and it works very, very well there. And it just kind of baffling to me sometimes. It's like whether it's states, countries, cities, whatever you want to say, like look at those examples of places that have done something well. And, Houston's not perfect. There's other problems there, but it's like they've done this very, very well. And I don't know if that's all of Texas that has no zoning, but certainly, and it wasn't like, and what people worry about in those instances is that you're going to have like, a falling down abandoned house next to a school, next to a mansion, but it doesn't happen that way. That's not actually how it plays out. Like there's still other factors that drive where a particular type of real estate may end up. And it's just kind of interesting to see, well, a bit larger societal thing, but sometimes we create problems that don't need to be problems just by, it's just, there's a problem that doesn't really need to be a problem. Like, and if people need housing and they need affordable housing, incentivizing people to build affordable housing seems to be the best solution. And yet there's a lot of resistance to that I'm not sure I always understand, but
It's probably quite a mindset thing. So, I think it's funny that if you get a lot of people in a room, I suppose a big phrase I use all the time is everyone's version of winning is different. And like, that's why we have entrepreneurs that make billions and it's still not enough because of what drives them. And I think when you look at the different viewpoints, if we were to go for coffee and we see a car crash, I'm going to notice different things than you're going to notice. And I think those mindsets and those observations and those ways of thinking probably bleed into everything we do. So someone else might say, well, let's just do this and we'll figure it out afterwards. And then someone else says, well, no, I can see afterwards and this is what's going to happen. So then it becomes a debate. And then a decade goes by and nothing got built. So it's kind of it's always going to be a hot topic. And I think the challenge as well is people try and do the best they can with the information they have to hand. But as human beings, we're flawed. And I think equally, one person only wants a bedroom, like Warren Buffett famously still in the same house. He doesn't have any want or will to grow a compound. And then you have other people that maybe go to Venice and spend the small gross profit or whatever it is of a small country on a wedding. Like everyone's version of that is different.
Yeah.
And I think in property, it's one of those things that, good enough for one person isn't good enough for another. And that's always going to be the challenge. That's human nature.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned, I mean, I'm assuming you're referring to the Bezos wedding, but it's just, that's a funny, it's been obviously in the news a lot, even over here. And it's funny to me because I'm like all the people that went to that wedding, like the famous people. And I'm like, I'm sure they don't know every single one of those celebrities that like, it's just like a weird, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand that whole world, but it's kind of a funny, like all the stories that have come out of that particular thing is just like crazy.
Can you imagine the small talk at the cocktail parties? In any other country, it's a case of, so how about that traffic or how about that weather? At least at an Amazon party, you get to default to, so what's the favorite thing you bought on Amazon? I don't know if Tom Brady buys off Amazon, but at least you got something to defer to.
Yeah. It's just like, no, I mean, I told you, like, I'm from Boston. Like, I'm a huge Tom Brady fan. I have season tickets to the Patriots, even though I don't live there anymore. I've never, ever once heard any story about Tom Brady being friends with Jeff Bezos or Lawrence Hedges. Like, of course, I don't know all of his friends, but it's just still like, that's not, it's just a weird world. But anyway, with that little bit of a off topic, but it just made me chuckle when you mentioned that because I'm just like, yeah, it's just extravagance for the sake of extravagance. I think in that scenario, but oh man, well, switching gears, Andrew, I ask every guest, one particular question. The name of the show is Know Your Why, and so I ask every guest, what is your why? What's driving you towards bigger success? Maybe it's so you can have that wedding in Venice. I don't know, but what is your why and kind of driver at this point in life?
I think the best way to describe my why now, I'm now 40, and I think my life's experience through, I've had a wonderful life and I've got a wonderful family, but I suppose I would have had a number of challenges. My father passed when I was younger. My mother passed 5 years ago. And I think the lesson behind them passing was my father was 52, my mother was 60. And that heavily influenced my why now, because I've tried to create a life that is as authentic as possible while still doing what I love. And I think when I began my agency, I started off, and I think in any business, it's very easy to take a template, so I'm a real estate agent. I will get a location. I will put on a suit and tie, have a clipboard, and I will, build a business that way. And I decided, you know what? I don't like suits. I don't want to tell people what they want to hear for the sake of it. And I don't want to have a conversation about my percentage or my fee. So my why is I love seeing people win. I love connecting people. I love relationships. I also love guiding people. And my inherent basis of everything I do is I love to be a part of people's lives, and I can guide them in one way, and I can still, connect them with someone. So let's say if you mentioned to me, I know you have the background in veterinary, I could know someone who's really interesting in that space. or you might love sailing or the Patriots. Like, I know a guy who's really interesting and I must connect you. That plays out in lots of other ways outside of a transaction. So my why is to build a business that creates a great life for my family. I've got 2 daughters and a wonderful wife and a black Labrador. I'll touch base if ever he gets sick, but so far he's good. And I really want to see the potential in people, see the potential in myself, and build a life by design, not be concerned about the 9 to 5. So there are Tuesdays and Wednesdays where maybe I'm washing the car, maybe I'm going for a walk. And then there are Sunday evenings where the laptop is open and I'm having a great call with a client who's abroad. But I think to live authentically, live honestly, and to not wish I was anywhere else. And don't assume that tomorrow is promised.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's we could do very, very well. People could do very, very well just with that, just coming from that place, just of living authentically. I think we could change a lot of, create a happier lifestyles for a lot of people. So I think that's phenomenal. Andrew, when people hear this and they want to connect, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot. That tends to be my platform of choice. I mix in relatability, humor, and the odd bit of expertise. So that helps. So that's my name, Andrew Rhatigan, on LinkedIn, or rhatiganrealestate.com or re.ie. And we do a free newsletter where we try and give people some value on the market and give them some guidance. But LinkedIn tends to be my poison. So I'd be generally on that quite a bit if people want to search out my name. It's the silent H after the R is what's going to catch people out. It's like how you spell pneumonia. The P is silent. But in my game, it's the H. And I've been called Mr. Rhatigan on numerous occasions, but it's Rhatigan. And that tends to be where I'm based most of the time.
Okay, perfect. We'll get that in the show notes so people can connect. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate having you on. So thanks for being here. It's been a great conversation.
Absolute pleasure, Jason. Thanks a million.
Absolutely. Folks listening, make sure you connect with Andrew. I'm now extremely curious about real estate in Ireland. I haven't actually been, so now I have someone I can connect with when I someday make that trip. But yeah, folks listening, please make sure you connect. Please like, rate, and review the show. And as always, thank you for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?